And so there's my bio. And today is called More Than a Name, Thomas Jefferson in Jefferson County, Kentucky, which we're in. And so you can see that, put Thomas Jefferson there in Jefferson County. And so Thomas Jefferson, there are 26 counties in the United States named for Thomas Jefferson. However, most of these counties are just in name only. But here in Jefferson, we have a number of connections to Thomas Jefferson. Now, Thomas Jefferson was never here in Jefferson County. He never traveled west of the Allegheny Mountains. But we have a lot of references to him here, and I'll explain that as we go along. And I just think that Jefferson County, Kentucky has more references. If you come to Jefferson County, Kentucky, you can kind of see the entire career of Thomas Jefferson by just going around the county and seeing some of the things that are images of his career. So Thomas Jefferson did a lot of great things. Declaration of Independence. He designed his home, Monticello, University of Virginia. He was President of the United States. He was Vice President of the United States. He was a farmer and inventor. Library of Congress he helped start. He was a revolutionary, governor of Virginia, and he was an explorer. So he did a lot of things in his life. And to see everything in his life, you'd have to go to these various locations. Charlottesville, Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, Philadelphia, Paris, France, and Washington, D.C. to see exactly what Thomas Jefferson did physically in his life. So I've got some images. A lot of people that say, well, what did Thomas Jefferson look like? Because there were no cameras back in those days, obviously. In fact, the first authentic photograph wasn't developed until 1838, which was 13 years after Jefferson died. So, but Jefferson lived from 1743 to 1826. So he was what, 81 years old, is that correct? Or 82, 83 years old when he died, 83 if I'm doing my math correct. And this painting here I just saw recently, it's up in Washington, D.C. at the National Portrait Gallery there in Washington, D.C. at the Smithsonian. And that was Jefferson when he was 42 years old. It was done in 1786, that portrait was. So he was actually 43 years old, I guess, when that was done. But he looks pretty youthful there, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Now here's a more relevant photograph that a lot of people have seen. This was done in 1791, so he would have been 38 years old, or 48 years old, if I'm doing my math correct. And it was done by an artist by the name of Charles Peale, and I'll talk about him in just a second. But it's a very striking photograph of Thomas Jefferson. Now this Charles Peale, this portrait painter, he was able to paint a lot of famous Americans back in the day, like Benjamin Franklin and all the signers of the Declaration of Independence, and just anyone that was a celebrity or politician back in the day, in the late 1700s, early 1800s, Charles Peale painted them like Thomas Jefferson. And in Philadelphia, they have all of Peale's paintings contained in the National Portrait Gallery there in Philadelphia. And it's just phenomenal. I'm not sure if anyone has ever been to the National Portrait Gallery or whatever, but you walk into this and all these just famous faces like Thomas Jefferson are just hanging on the wall there. And Peale, the reason why Peale did this was to make money. Again, this was back before photography, and a lot of people wanted to know what these famous folks looked like. And so he had his own museum of all these paintings in this room, and he charged admission to people to come in to see the paintings. And so he was an entrepreneur, and he went around, he painted the portraits, put them in his museum, and charged $1 or so for people to go inside to see them. So he's very entrepreneurial, Charles Peale was, and we are thankful that he was, because all of his paintings were just phenomenal. He was a great artist and did a lot of phenomenal paintings of the politicians and important people of his time. Now here are some other paintings of Thomas Jefferson. The one on the left John Turnbull's painting, 1788. I don't know about that. It doesn't quite look like Jefferson, does it? It looks like he's kind of crazy there. He would have been 45 years old when that painting was done. This was when he was vice president, I believe, or becoming president, by Rembrandt Peale. Now, Rembrandt Peale was Charles Peale's son, so he picked up the same artistic talent that his father had, and so he painted Thomas Jefferson in 1800.
Oh, the son picked it
And
up.
then Rembrandt Peale did another one of him in 1805. So you kind of see the progression of Thomas Jefferson's age through these portraits.
Did you say his son picked up the talent too?
Yeah, Rembrandt Peale was the son of Charles Peale. Yeah. So now then, as noted earlier, Jefferson County, we are named for Thomas Jefferson when he was governor of Virginia, 1779 to 1781, when the county was formed in 1780. We were all Virginians back in that day. We didn't become a state till 1792. But Thomas Jefferson was one of our first governors back in those days. So again, as noted earlier, the 26 counties in the United States are named for Jefferson, and Jefferson County, Kentucky, in my mind, has more references to Thomas Jefferson than the other 25.
Thomas Jefferson.
One of the first references I want to talk about is King Louis XVI, the namesake of Louisville, Kentucky. However you say his name is how you pronounce our name. I know there's a lot of different ways of saying Louisville, but it's not Louisville, it's Louisville, and it's based on King Louis XVI. Thomas Jefferson was minister to France between 1785 to 1789. And so Thomas Jefferson was in the court of King Louis XVI.
So they did call him King Louis.
And the reason why King Louis was so noted and why we're named for him is he provided the dollars and the soldiers and the uniforms and the ammunition for us to fight the British. So King Louis really was our benefactor in fighting the British, and that's why we're named Louisville. And I have a feeling back in the day there must be a letter from Thomas Jefferson to George Rogers Clark saying, hey, name this new community that was founded in 1780 for King Louis XVI. Here is the chateau at Marly. It was a design by Thomas Jefferson. Well, Chateau at Marly is over in France, and it is the same basis for the University of Virginia, which Thomas Jefferson designed. So King Louis was over at Chateau Marly. Thomas Jefferson undoubtedly was there, and when he laid out the University of Virginia, he did it in the same similar style. Now then, the King Louis statue downtown is made of Carrara marble, and it's a direct family connection between King Louis and this statue. King Louis's daughter, Marie Therese, had it commissioned. Marie Therese survived the French Revolution. All of the other family members of King Louis were killed in the Revolution except Marie Therese. She was imprisoned for a number of years, and when she got out, she ordered this statue of her father. And so this is actually blessed and made by, commissioned by his daughter. It was donated to us by our sister city, Montpellier, France, in 1966. The reason why they donated it to us, it was in storage. King Louis was still unpopular, but the statue wasn't being displayed. And so those folks in Montpellier, France says, you know, we've got this statue down in the basement. It really should be displayed. We don't want to display it, so let's give it to our sister city, which they did, and we've had it displayed downtown.
Well, they kept it in good shape.
So again, as noted, this is how you pronounce our name. I'll let y'all just decide which way you go about doing that. Unfortunately, it was not kept in good shape.
Oh, no.
During the protest of 2020, it was heavily vandalized,
Oh.
and it was removed. and it's been in storage ever since. So it's been in storage. It's been in storage for about 75% of its existence. It was in storage a long time in France. Now it's in storage here. I've since heard that the Metro Council has put money into the budget, this upcoming budget, to restore the statue and put it back.
Wait a minute, that's the way it looks now? It's in storage?
Yeah, that's what it looks like in storage.
Oh, no.
And again, this is where it once stood down near the courthouse.
Oh.
Now, King Louis's assistant, or not partner, but he delegated the Marquis de Lafayette to come to America to supervise the American Revolution. The Marquis de Lafayette was very important to George Washington. He was sort of like a staff assistant to Washington. He helped Washington, you know, whatever military maneuvers needed to be done, or make sure that the money was flowing to Washington from France to Washington. So Marquis de Lafayette was an extremely important person from France who came here to America to make sure the revolution was in good hands. And the Marquis was actually here in Louisville. I think it was in 1826, 1825 it says, when he was here. And we have a bronze bust of him downtown near 6th and Liberty is where that bust is. But it talks about him coming to America. But he was a key figure to King Louis and to Thomas Jefferson, the Marquis de Lafayette. There's Thomas Jefferson. So Thomas Jefferson sent George Rogers Clark. They were both born in the same county of Virginia, Albemarle County. I can't pronounce it properly, but they were born in the same county in Virginia. And so Thomas Jefferson, when he was governor, sent George Rogers Clark here to make sure this part of Virginia was protected from the British during the Revolutionary War. George Rogers Clark came here due to the Falls of the Ohio. It was a very strategic point along the Ohio River, and Thomas Jefferson wanted to make sure that it was protected. There's the Falls of the Ohio there. And again, we were part of Virginia back in 1776.
1776.
There were 3 counties originally in Kentucky. There was Lincoln County, Jefferson County, and Fayette County. Lincoln County was not associated with Abraham Lincoln. That was a whole different connection, if you will. Of course, Jefferson and Fayette was somewhat connected to the Marquis Lafayette. So there's Thomas Jefferson, George Rogers Clark. George Rogers Clark had a brother named William Clark. And William Clark did the Northwest Expedition that was recommended by Thomas Jefferson. So Thomas Jefferson wanted George Rogers Clark to do the expedition. George said, "I'm too old. My younger brother William is much better suited to do this expedition," of which he did. So Thomas Jefferson and the Northwest Expedition. And that expedition started in Louisville and ended in Louisville. I know the St. Louis folks put up an arch saying it was over there, but both Meriwether Lewis and William Clark met here in in the southern Indiana area, in Clarksville area. They met here, and when they finished the expedition, they came back here. So we're very much connected to the Northwest Expedition in this area because of that. So there's William Clark. That's his partner, Meriwether Lewis. And that's how they met here, over in the southern Indiana at the Clarksville area, at the Falls of the Ohio. Now then, what does Thomas Jefferson have to do with the origins of the Kentucky Derby? Hopefully you all remember this. But, so you have Thomas Jefferson, George Rogers Clark that he sent here, William Clark, his brother, Meriwether Lewis, Lewis and Clark Expedition. When William Clark had a son, he named him Meriwether Lewis Clark in honor of his expedition partner. And Meriwether Lewis Clark married Abigail Prather Churchill. So he married a Churchill, Meriwether Lewis Clark married a Churchill, and when they had a son, they named him Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr. You got all that genealogy straight? But all of that started because of Thomas Jefferson, George Rogers Clark, William Clark, Meriwether Lewis, the Churchill family, and then Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr. So that's how the Kentucky Derby got to Thomas Jefferson.
And Lewis.
Meriwether Lewis Clark Jr.,
Lewis Clark.
he liked horse racing. He attended the Epsom Derby over in England, came back to the United States. Kentucky was a great breeding ground for thoroughbreds. Said we need to have a signature horse race here. And on May 17th, 1875, it was the first Kentucky Derby, 150 years ago.
Oh, it's 1870.
So now then, as noted earlier, Thomas Jefferson planned the University of Virginia based on the chateau at Marly, which was over in France. He designed this Rotunda building, which was their library. And we likewise built a similar building here for the University of Louisville. The administration building at U of L is based on the University of Virginia and Thomas Jefferson's design.
Yeah,
Very similar.
that's close, yeah. See?
Now then, note the statue out front of our courthouse. It's of Thomas Jefferson, and all of these figurines at the base there are symbols of liberty and virtue and other sort of freedom sort of symbols there. And Thomas Jefferson is holding a copy of the Declaration of Independence, but it's out front of our courthouse there. It was donated by Isaac Burnham of Bernheim Forest fame, designed by Sir Moses Ezekiel, dedicated November 9th, 1901. So it's what, 123 years old, if I'm doing the math correct? Now then, so we had the statue out front of our courthouse of Jefferson, and the University of Virginia people, they liked it a lot. So they liked it so much that when they duplicated it and put it in front of their library over in Thomas Jefferson's building, so they liked our statue so much that they made a replica of it and installed it out front of the Rotunda building by Thomas Jefferson. So another connection between us.
Excuse me,
And
what is the
Jefferson.
building down there on the lower right again? What is that one?
That's the Rotunda building at the University of Virginia.
Oh,
And there you go, you can see the connection. So our Jefferson County Courthouse and the Rotunda at the University of Virginia has the same sculpture in front of Thomas Jefferson. Now then, Thomas Jefferson also designed the Virginia State Capitol in Richmond. There you see it in the upper portion. It was based on the Mason Curie, I can't pronounce it. My friend, even though I studied French in college, or in high school, I'm poor at French, but it's in Nimes, France. So he based that state capitol design on that sort of pavilion in Nimes, France. And our Jefferson County Courthouse is somewhat similar to all of that. There's the original design of the Jefferson County Courthouse, and that's what it looks like today. So you can kind of see the different columns. In fact, when you notice, our Gideon Shryock, who designed the Jefferson County Courthouse, he had 6 columns. That had 6 columns. But when they finally built it, they only built it with 4 columns, and they did not do the dome. So, anyways, another connection between Thomas Jefferson and Jefferson County is these 2 buildings. Now then, one of Thomas Jefferson's most acclaimed accomplishments was help writing the Declaration of Independence. His signature is right there. And we actually have a copy of it. There were, in 1824, there were 200 duplicates made of the Declaration of Independence. Today, only 27 of those remain. And we have one of those, and it's on display in the atrium of our courthouse. So that's another good connection between Thomas Jefferson and Jefferson County. It's very rare that we had only a few copies of those remaining, and we have one of those.
Got all those signatures.
Of course, we have Jefferson Street in downtown Louisville. Don't want to forget that. That's a connection. Thomas Jefferson's Monticello. Has anyone here been to Monticello?
Yeah.
Beautiful, yeah, I've been several times, and I can't wait to go back. It's phenomenal. Thomas Jefferson was constantly tinkering with Monticello. I think at one point it was 2 stories tall, then he lowered it down, and he was constantly changing it around. Well, we have a similar Monticello here in Louisville. This bank building at Eastern Parkway and Preston Street is based obviously on that design. And the reason why the First National Bank folks decided to design it like that is they handled a lot of money. And on the, this is is it the quarter that he's on? I think, no, it's the nickel. Thomas Jefferson's on the nickel, and Monticello is on the nickel. And there you go. So another connection. So yeah, it's beautiful, that little Monticello bank there at Eastern Parkway and Preston Street. I think it is now another commercial function. It's no longer a bank, but I'm glad it's still there. Farmington. Lucy Speed, who is the wife of Judge John Speed, who lived there at Farmington, she was related to Dr. Thomas Walker, who was a guardian to young Thomas Jefferson. So this house has a direct, again, another connection to Thomas Jefferson. A lot of people thought originally it was designed by Thomas Jefferson, but it was actually, the design is credited to a person by the name of Paul Skidmore. Don't know much about him, but he obviously knew about Jefferson's design principles and made sure that he utilized a similar style. Here are some interior photographs of Farmington. Hopefully people have been to Farmington. It's a beautiful historic home. It's open for public tours. Now then, there's another Farmington in Charlottesville, Virginia. So there's our Farmington in the upper right-hand corner, and there's the Farmington in Charlottesville, Virginia. Notice any similarities?
No.
Well, this was designed by Thomas Jefferson, this portion of this house. It was designed in 1802 by Jefferson. So again, same name, same style of design. Now then, Thomas Jefferson also designed these homes here, Edgemont in Fan Mountain, Virginia, and Belle Grove in Middletown, Virginia. Both of those are attributed to Thomas Jefferson. Again, very similar with the gable portico there, the 4 columns, similar window design.
Yeah.
So again, very similar, and a symmetrical plan. So
The one in Virginia is smaller.
so our Farmington, very similar to what Thomas Jefferson would have designed. And there are other homes in the area that have similar characteristics. This one here is Salima Hall. This is actually right down the street from where I live, but it is very similar to Monticello. And this is more of a modern version of Monticello on Glenview Avenue here in Louisville.
Yeah, that's great.
Jeffersonville, Indiana, just across the river. Other than the name, what would you think would be the connection to Thomas Jefferson of this southern Indiana city? Well, would you believe that Thomas Jefferson did the original layout for Jeffersonville, Indiana? This is it right here. It's very similar to Savannah, Georgia. If you've ever been to Savannah, Georgia, Savannah, Georgia has those green parks in the center of the square that you drive around. Well, what Thomas Jefferson did a similar design, only instead of the square in the center, he did the corners as parks. So as you went into the intersection, he had all this greenery and parks on all the corners, which was
So all that
fairly nice.
So all that was little patches of ground in the middle there.
That is correct. This is all trees and grass and plantings.
Well, that's-
Unfortunately, this was never implemented, obviously. If you've ever been to Jeffersonville, Indiana, it looks nothing like that layout. And the reason is the developers got there first and sort of set up another layout, and this was never built per Thomas Jefferson.
Were
But
those
just,
roads through there then?
that's correct, those are the streets. But just think if that had been implemented like that, Jeffersonville would be like Savannah, Georgia. And boy, that would have been something. But alas, it did not happen. But they did go ahead and install a statue of Thomas Jefferson there at, I think it's at Spring and Court Street areas in Jeffersonville. Did you know that one of Thomas Jefferson's family members is buried in Kentucky? Who might this relative be? It was his sister. His sister, Lucy Jefferson Lewis, who was the youngest sister to Thomas Jefferson. She was born in 1752, came to Kentucky in 1808 with her husband, Dr. Charles Lewis. She died in 1811 and is buried in Livingston County, Kentucky, which is in far western Kentucky. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly where she's buried at. We know that she's buried in that county somewhere, and I think they have a historical marker near where they think she might be buried, but her gravesite has been lost over time. So kind of a sad story there. Just recently, I was in Washington, D.C., and if you ever go to the Library of Congress, has anyone ever been to the Library of Congress? It's a beautiful building. It's free to go in for what it's worth. I mean, there's no charge to go inside it. Beautiful interior. But what's key about this Library of Congress is Thomas Jefferson started the Library of Congress by donating 3,000 volumes of his books to begin that Library of Congress. And so when you go into the Library of Congress on one of the upper floors, they have all the books that he donated assembled there in a special collection, in a special room. So you can go in and see the books that he actually donated. Now they don't quite have all of his books. In fact, they have this coded system. You'll see some have green labels on them, gold labels, a no label, different types of labels. So the ones with green labels are from Jefferson's original collection. Those with a gold ribbon are ones that were recently acquired. Those that are no ribbon, I think, were because they are the book that he would have donated. They don't have all of his original collection. They have books that are of that collection, but anyways, so they don't have all 3,000 books. Some are missing, and so they supplement that with a duplicate copy that he didn't own, but it's there in the collection. So they do have all 3,000 of the books that he would have donated in the Library of Congress. And it is just phenomenal to go in and see this. You can see everyone looking at it.
There were thousands of books that he donated?
3,000. 3,000.
3,000, wow.
So now then, Thomas Jefferson was born on April 13th, 1743. He died July 4th, 1826. President from 1801 to 1808. Vice President 1796 to 1800. And this is his obelisk at his gravesite. And it talks about him being buried there. He was the author of the Declaration of Independence. And there. So there's a little bit more history there. He never did set foot in Jefferson County. As I said earlier, he never came west of the Allegheny Mountains. I don't even know how far west he actually went. Not very much. He usually just traveled between Charlottesville and Washington, Philadelphia. I take it he went to New York City, because I think that's where the capital was at one point prior to Washington, D.C. being occupied. So I've actually been to a lot of these sites that I've been talking about. I've been to Monticello in Charlottesville, Virginia several times. I've obviously been to the University of Virginia, which is nearby. I've been to Independence Hall, where the Declaration of Independence was written. I've been to the National Archives where they actually have the original Declaration of Independence under secure glass there. You can actually go in and see it, but I've been there. I've been to the White House where of course he lived there while he was president. Been to the Library of Congress where his book collection is. The Virginia State Capitol, been to Richmond, Virginia. And 2 years ago, went to Paris, France. So I was in Paris where he would have been at. And I was at Versailles, France, which was of course the big palace that King Louis XVI and all the French monarchs lived in. How do we say Versailles in Kentucky?
Versailles.
Versailles, that is correct. So anyways, that's the life of Thomas Jefferson, all the various locations that he was at. And as noted earlier, we in Jefferson County, to get a whole range of his life achievements, we can just drive around within maybe an hour or so and see a lot of the things that he had touched. And fortunately, we are named for him, Jefferson County, Kentucky.
So you visit all the libraries.
Yeah, so thanks. Any questions on all this?
Yeah,
Has anyone been to those sites that Thomas Jefferson was in?
Some of them, yes.
yeah.